Hello, everyone. We're glad you could join us tonight. We're going to do part two of the M.J. Bingham proof. And this, of course, is a follow up on our first report that we did, explaining a little bit about how M.J. Bingham responded to Brother Warden and his request for some references to confirm that there would be more than 144,000 sealed at Ezekiel 9 Church Judgment. And of course, we know that in our first video, we showed clearly that that first reference was clearly taken out of context and not applied in the right meaning. And so we're going to look at the remainder 2, 3, and 4 references and see what we can find there. But we want to show a picture here of M.J. Bingham in the early 1950s. And of course, we'd like to someday soon do just a regular video about M.J. Bingham and what he was his part in the early days with the message. But just to make a quick synopsis of it, MJ had a troubled history with the movement. He started out well. Of course, Brother Hodoff in the early days even put some of his advice into the Golden Bowl. We can actually find that in let's see. We can find that in one symbolic code number 5, page 7 through 9. And that is really very interesting to note that Brother Hodoff gave him a great responsibility to add to the bowl. And basically, this part here was about how can we labor more successfully in presenting the message. So clearly, we can see that Brother Hodoff put great faith in this Brother Bingham at the beginning stages and trusted that Bingham was coming along well in the message. And unfortunately, after events from there were going downhill. And of course, we know that the time where Brother Hodoff took a trip to his home country of Bulgaria, M.J. Bingham was found to be doing some really terrible things with some of the young gals there in the camp. And when it got back, Brother Hodoff had no choice but to remove him from the camp. And of course, this caused the divorce between him and his wife. And then, according to Sister Bonnie, Brother Hodoff was very firm and put it even on the chalkboard in the cafeteria one day that Mrs. Bingham was free to marry, but M.J. Bingham was not free to marry. And he was so firm about this that he put it up on the chalkboard. And come to find out, M.J. Bingham got married. And so this is just one example of the spiritual problems we have here. And unfortunately, those problems developed into doctrinal problems, as we're experiencing right now with this uncovering of this doctrine that M.J. Bingham brought, unfortunately, to the message. So let's now begin with looking at the other references. Okay, so they are For Answer, page 35, question 92, White House Recruiter, page 46, Timely Greetings, volume 2, number 4, page 15. Okay, in For Answer, page 35, question 92, it reads, in the final analysis, however, it is neither the rod's purpose nor its intent to say just how many wise or how many foolish there will be in this first fruit harvest. For when the whole truth is made known, the figure of the 5 wise virgins, besides comprehending the 144,000 from the tribes of Israel, may be found to include a considerable number from the Gentile nations. So, in understanding that quote, um, inspiration leaves no stone unturned. In question 93 in volume 4, it simply shows us who could possibly be these wise virgins that are found in the first fruit harvest. And of course, this 93 clearly shows that uh, it may be some from without the SDA church. In other words, not within it, but from without it, involved in some other faith or church or something, but it knows the message. And so this is certainly a possibility of another uh, first fruit wise virgin. We'll pause for a minute for you can read this one. Okay, and another reason why that this answer uh, reference, which was published in 1944, cannot be saying what the Those With crowd says it says, because in the same year we find this, and this, in fact, is probably the number one most clearest of all references that can leave no doubt. So, what are we to conclude? Are we to conclude that we have a bipolar prophet that speaks on both ends of his mouth? In one answer volume, he says this, and the other answer volume, he says that. No, no, brother. They have to mesh. It's all one spirit speaking through the prophet. So this is obvious that this here is the clarity. The other one is not so clear as this. So that one blends with the clarity. It doesn't work the other way around. You don't take something that's very, very clear and try to make it blend into something that is not so clear, kind of clear, but not so. You can't do it. It's got to be the other way. So this is very, very clear statement, which we cannot ignore. Okay, our second reference is found in White House Recruiter, page 46. As present truth adherents in the first fruit period, may God help us all, brothers and sisters, to be either among or along with the first fruits, the 144,000. It is left to everyone himself to determine his own destiny. The Message explains, and this is why we want to put this quote in here, because this and the next one will clearly show the example of why inspiration was spot on with this quote here. Remember, too, that the practice of comparing statements stripped of the context is fundamentally disingenuous and leads today to as many perversions and misapplications of truth as does the deliberate wrestling practice in Satan's challenge to Christ. Answer volume 1, page 48, question 3. So let's keep this injunction in mind as we go through this reference and the last one. All right. So with that in mind, what we want to do is show you the prior paragraph before our reference number 2, and that reads, "But if you make your decision for the better, then you will receive God's mark." Ezekiel 9, Testimonies to Ministers, page 445, in your foreheads, to be accounted faultless before his judgment throne, and to be privileged either to come up in the resurrection of Daniel 12:2, or to stand aforehand with the Lamb on Mount Zion, thence to carry God's message to all nations and bring all your brethren for an offering to the house of the Lord. Isaiah 66:19 and 20. You will become part of the first fruits, the nucleus of the kingdom church, the token of the second fruits of the living, of those whom you subsequently bring in. All right. Now let's take a look at this prior uh, paragraph to see what context and what it tells us here. It says that you receive God's mark to be one of two things: privilege to come up in the resurrection of Daniel 12:2, or to be one of the 144,000, Revelation 14:1. Do you see any others that it makes a reference to? Do you see any open windows for anything else? No. You see straight, clear reference. One, Daniel's resurrection, Daniel 12:2, two, 144,000. Okay, so in our last one, it is found on Timely Greetings, Volume 2, Number 4, page 15. Your knowledge of these things, though, will not benefit you if you do not make a desperate effort to be one of or one with the 144,000. You, moreover, must have this extra oil in your vessels, Matthew 25, 1 to 12. Now, while it is so freely dispensed, to get it later will not profit you. For the latecomers will find the door closed. Their knocking on the door will only cause them to hear the master say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." Matthew 7:23. Indeed, you must immediately avail yourself of this light-giving oil now while it is brought to your doors, if it is to do you any good. Okay, so this, as we mentioned before, is another classic example of you cannot strip these references out of their context. So let's go and look at the prior paragraph. This consolation, you note, is permanent, and since there are no sinners in it, it is obviously, as shown elsewhere in our literature, is the result of the judgment of the house of God, the judgment of the living, the purification of the church, the separation of the bad fish from the good, the cleansing of the sanctuary, the harvest of the first fruits, the 144,000 that stand on Mount Zion with the Lamb, the remnant. Then follows the ingathering of the second fruits. Okay, so we can clearly see here that the uh, the statement is clear. The judgment of the house of God's house produces who? The 144,000. Does it say the 144,000 and some others? Of course not. So this is the prior paragraph that explains, we'll go back to that again, this. So your knowledge will not benefit you unless you will be one of the 144,000 or one with. Now we know because of the message that the withs are the special of Daniel 12:2. So Brother Hodoff in his day, we know this is a fact, was preaching to who? Was he preaching to the 144,000 or was he preaching to those with? In hindsight, we know perfectly clearly what it was. Even though Brother Hodoff did not know, his mission was to speak to us, yes, but personally, on a personal level, his mission was to speak to the candidates of those with. This is all what these those with proclaimers forget about or don't even consider. And this is something that is a big, big mistake on their part. Okay, so our summary is this. Each reference provided by M.J. Bingham in his response to Brother Warden was taken out of context and misapplied. This is a classic example of why the Lord warned us in Revelation 22, 18 and 19, not to add or subtract to his word. Satan has his counterfeit 144,000 truth. And those of us with eyes to see and minds to comprehend know very well what that is. It is M.J. Bingham's deception, those with living doctrine. So that concludes our presentation on this M.J. Bingham story and how the 144 of those with was started by him and how his house of cards really come crumbling down when you take close inspection. So we have prayed and we hope that you do the same before each and every video that we present. And may God be with you until next time. God bless.